So, firstly, welcome everyone. This is the first in a series of seminars that we're planning for the Data Innovation Hub. And I'll talk to you a bit more about what the Data Innovation Hub is. A quick introduction. My name is Sean Lee. I'm a Director of Analytics at RMIT and a chair of today's panel. Right? I talk about panel, but I hope it's more of a roundtable discussion. I'm going to be talking about a couple of interesting topics, and we're going to have 40 plus people listening into the discussion and asking questions as well. Right. So just very quickly, what is this Data Innovation Hub seminar series? So the Data Innovation Hub is a project that we started in RMIT this year proper, where we're getting students who want to do a placement in data and analytics with industry partners who are desperately looking for people who want to work on their projects. So these are paid placement opportunities in which we're connecting students with industry partners such as EY, Synergy, Vicinity Centers. So really great range of companies who are doing quite a lot of projects in AI, ML, and data and analytics. We have today as well people from our data and analytics team.
So I think we've lost Sean.
Hopefully he'll be back in a minute.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello. All right.
Yes,
I'm going onto my mobile network and hotspotting there because maybe that's more reliable than my fixed line connection.
Yeah.
Give me a second, please.
Technology.
Yeah. All right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Am I back? Cool. All right. Is my screen still sharing?
Yep.
All right. Cool. So as I was saying, Data Innovation Hub, we have also with us here people who have just completed the CRE AI Skills Bootcamp. So it's kind of like a celebration, guys, of your achievements in the last 3 weeks. So well done. And I hope the content that we're discussing here is a good springboard into other practical things that you're going to be doing. All right. So today we have the pleasure of having 4 very esteemed guests joining me. We have from RMIT, Nonna Milmeister, who is our Chief Data Analytics Officer. I have also from RMIT, Adjunct Associate Professor, Dr. Alex Antic. From Deloitte, Angela Kim, who is a Director in the AI and Data Analytics Practice, and also the National Ambassador for Women in AI. So, Angela, maybe you can give us a bit more about that. And from Google, Ben Hutchinson, who's a researcher in responsible AI. All right. Now, I promised to keep it quite informal. So what better way than to actually get our panel to introduce themselves? So panel, can you give us an elevator pitch, meaning short and sharp, about who you are, what you do, and maybe an interesting fact as well, just to break the ice? We'll start with Nonna.
Okay. Well, I'm a Chief Data and Analytics Officer at RMIT University. I have maybe 30 plus experience in all things data and recently in analytics as well. Absolutely enjoy my role at RMIT. Absolutely love my team, love to help our stakeholders. And a fun fact about me, the only sport I really care about is figure skating. So, I used to be quite good at that. And so now I absolutely enjoy my evenings because I can watch ice skating, figure ice skating in Olympics.
Thanks, Nonna. Over to Angela.
Sorry. Hi, Sean. Hi, everyone. Thanks for inviting this great opportunity. My name is Angela, and as Sean mentioned, I've just started my new role date at Deloitte, so still it's not really natural coming out. Like, I am the director of data analytics and AI at at Deloitte, especially assurance and audit practice, and also my passion project with my heart is not that I'm not with Deloitte, but another work I work with Women in AI. We are global do tank based in Paris, and we do have about 140 chapters globally. And I lead Australia and APAC, and I work as a chief education officer. So what I do is I bring the best practice from EU and other regions into APAC, so that we can really democratize AI practice. And it's such a pleasure to be with amazing esteemed panelists Nonna and Dr. Alex and Ben today, and looking forward to having a really meaningful conversation with the students and everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Angela. Over to Ben.
Hey, thanks, Sean, and hi, everyone. Thanks for having me today. I'm at Google in responsible AI, as Sean mentioned. I spent most of my career actually as a software engineer on Google product teams, working on Google Maps, Google Search. And about 5 years ago, I had the opportunity to move into Google Research to work in responsible AI. And I've always really enjoyed both the technical side of things as well as the people side of things. And so being able to kind of bring those together and focus on how AI can benefit people and also minimize and mitigate harms and risks as well is really a sweet spot that I've really been enjoying. Fun fact, one of my hobbies is Japanese drumming, which I really love.
Fantastic. Maybe if we've got time, we'll do a bit of a performance later on.
Yeah, you know what? I was carried away, Sean, and I forgot to talk about the fun fact. Actually, I was going to mention about, Nonna mentioned about ice skating, right? So the fun fact about me is I'm from South Korea, Gangnam, old Gangnam style, and I'm a trained ice skater since I was kindergarten. So Nonna, there's something we need to talk about.
We can,
so
we can go partying. Yeah.
I think so. Something in common. So that's fun fact about me. Thank you.
Thanks, Angela. Over to Alex.
Thank you. I'm actually a professional ice skater and professional snowboarder. So you can see me on the Olympics.
Oh my God, I've started something there.
I'm actually a recovering quantitative analyst, an aging mathematician, and a reformed academic. Fun fact is I love watching spaghetti westerns, especially with Clint Eastwood. So I like to think of myself as a data science gun for hire, but in reality, I run my own consulting, advisory, and training business in data science and AI, and love working with industry, government, academia, and startups to really help them with their AI projects. Excited to be today, and hopefully our attendees will be able to ask some great questions that we can help them with. So eager to get stuck into it, Sean.
Thanks. All right, let's get stuck into it. Before we begin, though, a few safety rules and briefing, obligatory briefing. Well, please mute your microphones so that we can hear from our guests on the panel. And also, if you've got questions, you can feel free to use the chat. Or at the end, I'll also open it up and you can use your mics to ask the questions. We'll be recording the session and I'll share the link at the end. All right, cool. So let's start. So we're going to be focusing on two themes today, right? Now, they're very meaty themes of lots of content in it, and I'm sure great discussion. So I'm going to be doing my best to keep time moving, but we'll see how we go, right? The two themes are, firstly, ethics. It's a big topic nowadays, also known as responsible AI. So I think we've got great representation in this panel to talk through this topic, and it's going to be very relevant for all of us. And the second symbolizes pathways, right? So a lot of us have been in analytics or starting off in the analytics career, and we're going to be discussing pathways to building a successful analytics career. All right. So without further ado, let's jump into our first theme. All right. And on the theme of ethics, I'm going to share a quick video to start with. And I'm going to say I'm not endorsing any particular brand, right? I just like the content in this video. So let's give it a go. Hopefully my internet doesn't play up.
Felix?
Name.
Felix.
Can you hear anything? All right, cool.
Yep.
Date of birth.
November 5th, 1986.
Tracking current location.
Can I have a taste of your ice cream?
Here's what you spent last month.
Crumbs from your table. Can I interfere in your crisis? Can you hear those people behind
This will
me?
help with the itching.
Can I have a taste of your ice cream? Can I lick the crumbs from your table? No! Mind your own business. Why don't you mind your own business? Why don't you mind your own business?
All right. So it's interesting, you know, the concept around in a very digitally connected world, our information's everywhere. And sometimes it's like having strangers in your living room with you, right? The next thought starter I just wanted to share with you is the fact that AI is the fastest growing tech sector in the world, all right? It's valued at $327.5 billion, which is even bigger than the GDP of many sizable countries. Another thought starter and probably quick clickbait, right? So from the great mind of Stephen Hawking, and Stephen Hawking has said that AI could end mankind, right? Probably a bit sensationalist, but nevertheless some truth in that. And in Stanford University, a report called the AI Index, in which we see that a number of academic papers mentioning the word ethics has seen a dramatic increase in the last 5 years. And closer to home, this is a survey of over 400 business executives in Australia, right? And it was performed and it tallies in a report called the Responsible AI Index. And it found that only 8% of companies, so that's on the far right, count themselves as mature in having responsible AI practices, right? So I guess on the flip side of that, 92% of companies aren't confident that they've got responsible and ethical AI practices or mature responsible AI practices, all right? So let's unpack this a little, and I'm going to ask my panel to help me unpack this, right? Now, the first question to start off goes to Ben, right? So Ben, I guess with your experience in Google leading edge AI company, right? Should I be preparing an underground bunker in case this guy shows up? Or hopefully not this guy, right? Okay, I'm being cheeky and showing my age in terms of movies, right? But the more serious question is, what is the definition of responsible AI? And how worried should we be about irresponsible AI, right? So if you catch stories to share about responsible AI and a good definition for us to start with.
Thanks, Sean. It's a great question, and I thank you for raising those kind of counterexamples. I think a lot of people like to use these kind of end of the world type examples. There's so many kind of practical concerns to worry about right now that kind of I don't think we need to worry about those futures just yet. Responsible AI, that's a big topic. And I'm going to try to unpack it into two parts. One is like the responsible part, and one is kind of the AI part. And because I think actually there's lots of lessons from responsible technology more broadly that are applicable to AI. And actually one of the themes I spend a lot of time talking about is that certain things are not special to AI, right? A lot of these kind of questions about what kind of technology do we want in the world, what kind of technology has positive outcomes. These questions have been around forever, and they apply to AI as well. And so let me give you a couple examples maybe. So there was this city planner called Robert Moses, who's in New York in the middle of the 20th century, and he's famous for kind of building these highways and bridges around kind of greater New York City. And on some of the highways, he had these kind of overpass bridges that had very low height, about 11 feet, I think it was, which was fine for the cars, which could kind of zoom along underneath these bridges in the 1950s. But by designing the highways and the bridges this way, it actually prevented public buses and public transport from using these highways. And so it actually prevented, typically poorer people, typically kind of black communities in that region from using their preferred means of transportation on all these new roads. So it created like a bias in who was able to access this technology of roads in that region. And it's been debated whether this was an intentional or unintentional consequence. Like, did he plan to exclude black people from using these new highways, or was it an unintentional side effect? Maybe we'll never know, but I think it's one of these consequences that could and should have been foreseen, right? By engaging with communities and understanding different modes of transportation, this is something that could have been foreseen. A lot of my work has actually been on the history of fairness of technology, and particularly after the Civil Rights Act of 1964. In case you're wondering about my funny accent, I am Australian, but I spent a lot of my career in the US, so my accent's this weird hybrid by now. And a lot of my examples are from the US, so apologies for that. But after the Civil Rights Act in the US in the 1960s, it kind of outlawed discrimination in education, which is a really like positive intent, but then people tried to work out, well, what does it actually mean? How can we measure discrimination? If this thing is now illegal, how can we actually measure what it means to discriminate in educational settings as well as in the workplace? And one of the really interesting things is that essentially kind of statisticians of the time came up with these statistical definitions of what fairness and bias and unfairness meant that kind of mirror exactly the contemporary definitions that AI researchers came up with independently 50 years later. And also in the 60s and 70s during this period, they realized that there's multiple different ways to define fairness that all seem reasonable, right? And it wasn't kind of any kind of a priori reason to prefer one definition of fairness over another. But the problem was they also realized these definitions were incompatible. And so this kind of like, there was this kind of mathematical incompatibility. You just couldn't solve everyone's ideals about fairness. And I think this is an important point, because I think it forced people to confront that we need human agency in deciding what fairness looks like, what ethics looks like. We can't try to delegate these things simply to statistics and assume that it's kind of a mathematical property that will fall out of some proofs. We need to decide for ourselves what kind of world we want to live in, what kind of consequences we want from our technology. So I can talk for a long time, so please gong me or bell me or whatever. But I'll quickly mention, that's kind of a little couple examples from the responsible side. When it comes to AI specifically, and there's many definitions of AI that I won't even try to define what AI is, but I think in contemporary contexts, when people talk about AI, they often mean things like deep learning and big data, especially in my field. It's all to do with kind of these huge models trained on enormous amounts of data. And whether it's image data or language data or other forms. And I think, again, coming back to this question of agency, so I think of AI in this context as having autonomous systems that can kind of make decisions or affect interactions in the world in some way, systems that have some real world consequences. And I think it's really important we don't, again, cede our human agency to these systems. I think it's really important that we kind of are deliberate in what we want these systems to do. And one thing, because these systems do learn from data by machine learning, they tend to replicate any biases in the data sets. And so I think one of the real big risks for responsible AI is people not really understanding the biases in the data sets. And that can be biases that stem from how the data was collected, all sorts of like representation biases, selection biases, and so on. And really, if you don't understand where your data is coming from, if you don't understand the biases in your data, and then if you don't use your kind of human agency to work out, not all biases are going to be bad as well. It's a thing. There's been lots of correlations in your data that are going to be innocuous. So understanding which ones are actually potentially harmful requires lots of like careful data analysis to look through your data sets. Because if you don't do that before training your models, then your models are just going to replicate these potentially negative biases, harmful biases. And like with the bridge example, there could be all sorts of downstream consequences that you never foresaw. So maybe I'll stop there.
Yeah, I think that's great insight. It's not just about the model and how we use it, but it's actually inherent in the data, and we need to be aware of that. Angela, I'm going to ask you a question, right? And maybe from the perspective of someone in the workforce or a graduate entering the workforce, why do I need to be concerned about ethics? Isn't it something that our leaders are meant to come up with frameworks and controls that we just follow? Are we going to be personally responsible?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Sean, for sharing really important question. So maybe I'd like to start with the example of when the surgeons, doctors, they enter to practice, they do Hippocratic oath, like, I do solemnly swear that, what I do is really impacting the human lives, and as a consequences, I'm taking this really seriously. And these days, I think same thing applies to data professionals. And the students graduating this, data science and these courses are actually entering the career who's actually responsible of, managing and using the data. As we can see that, we saw that from the, the clip that Sean shared. You can see that everywhere we go, we are living in a data-fied world. So we can't just remove the data, which means we do have enormous actually influence and power as a data scientists and engineers, right? And we can really do, I think I really liked the part actually, Ben, mentioned about conscious and unconscious, because without knowing, sometimes knowing, but taking it very lightly, you can really result in unexpected consequences, and it can have very exponential impact. And that's why it's so important for students to understand what we are going to do is a really serious job, and you have to do the right thing. But who decides what's right and what's not right? And that's where the ethics comes in. So when you're studying, so it's really important. This kind of great event is very, very helpful, because it really gives opportunity to the young, data science professionals to be ready before they enter the workforce. Actually, this is something we need to consider as much as we want to improve our data science skills, really getting great, creating great algorithm as accurate as possible. But what if it's really, is it worth it if it's really actually the consequences is negative, because you haven't considered all these the data bias that you used, and the how you didn't consider the representation of the demographic, whether it's age or racial and all different profiles, right? So it's knowing that from the beginning what needs to be done makes a huge difference, not knowing it. So that's why it's really great. You go and get into the project and learn from the job, learn from peers and people around you. And I think that's a really good first step. And so I'm really glad to see this kind of event and great workshop to really raising awareness and sharing the insights from the practitioners and the students, bringing academics, bringing all together in the ecosystem, so that we can really try to work together to improve the responsible, ethical, and more explainable AI.
Thanks, Angela. I'm going to pick up a point you said around, in the medical field, how students, doctors take up a Hippocratic oath and they're held to a code of ethics. All right. I know it's not like that at the moment in our field, but a question for Alex, right? Because you do deal with government and government bodies and so on. What's your view in terms of regulation and control in the area of ethics? Are we close to that? At the moment, it's just guidelines, right, that we have. But do you see regulators coming in? And as professionals, how do we prepare for it?
Great question, Sean. And some of what I'll mention will actually reiterate the great points raised by Ben and Angela, and try going to dig a little bit deeper into some of those. So I think generally it's become accepted that regulation is necessary to both manage associated risks with AI and to also encourage development of responsible AI systems. Regulation really focuses on the risks and biases of AI's underlying technology, which Ben touched on, the machine learning models that power AI. And really, regulation touches a number of parts. There's responsibility and accountability of the systems. There's privacy associated with the development of the systems, storage of the system, and the underlying data. There's safety and security associated with all that. Then there's governance of autonomous systems such as self-driving cars and other systems that kind of autonomously make decisions that impact us in some way. I think adoption of regulation will occur faster in some fields over others and in some countries and jurisdictions. I think of healthcare, law enforcement, finance, etc., things that have direct impact on us. We've already seen GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation, come into effect. I think it was 2018, which governs the fair use of personal data relating to individuals in the EU. And I think as AI becomes a core part of our lives increasingly, we've seen through social media and mainstream media, there's this growing societal demand for clearer rules to ensure that AI is used fairly. And as AI increases the potential of its positivity in society, there's also this risk of scaling bias, as Ben mentioned, as any flaw in a system, such as a particular bias, racial bias or gender bias, could really affect the millions, at scale, which has an effect of exposing companies to class action lawsuits. So in May this year, the European Union became the first government body in the world to issue draft regulations aimed at specifically development and use of AI. And these are just, I think, one step towards global AI regulation, which is increasingly becoming, more likely around the corner. I think in the next year or two, we'll see a lot more of this happening, both overseas and closer to us. Developing awareness and consideration of ramifications of the systems that graduates and practitioners are developing, I think, is really important for them to understand that real people are being affected by this. At times, it's not just data that they're working on, but data that affects people. So I think it's becoming really important to understand and develop this awareness early on in your career, and also in some ways from a practical point of view to learn to develop good documentation with your associated with your systems, because as regulation and auditing increases in this field, you need to be able to justify and clearly explain why you chose a particular data set, why you developed a particular model, and how you went through a testing regime for that. As AI systems depend not only on the data that's fed into them that we've discussed, but also the people who develop the algorithms, I think it's important for people to understand that there's numerous points in that whole data pipeline and development process where bias can creep in. So I think this highlights it's not just a technical problem, it's very much a people problem at its core. Now, while we can't completely eliminate bias, what we can do is work towards understanding it, identifying it, and then reducing it. And typically this covers three broad areas where practitioners and teams will work in. There's the data, which Ben mentioned, around understanding how bias can creep in, being able to identify potentially embedded bias, and things like, is the data that you're using fair and representative? And I think more importantly is this discovery phase, which involves the actual model development. So asking yourself questions as a developer, data scientist, how is fairness and bias actually being defined in this model? How do you define it mathematically? And is there standardized ways that you can define it between different systems? And there are various organizations like, the big tech companies that are looking at introducing fairness metrics to try and measure this. But one important question to think about is, how do you actually define fairness at a technical level? Are you basing fairness on the model inputs or the outputs from the model? When is it deemed fair enough to actually be deployed as a system? Is the model explainable, and to whom? Are you trying to explain the model to the developer that developed it to try and debug it? Are you trying to explain it to the manager, to the CEO, to an auditor, to a customer and citizen? Big questions that need to be asked. So there's always this trade-off that occurs between fairness and accuracy in model development that needs to be juggled and accepted in some level. And I think broader than that, what we need, in a broader sense, is more diversity and inclusion in the teams that develop these systems. I'm talking about diversity like technical, legal, risk governance, but also diversity in the people, gender diversity, age, race, etc. Because you want different thoughts and opinions that drive this. So I'd just like to finish this point by saying that I think the future really lies in humans and machines working together to advance society. And the way to do this is to build socially aware systems, such as trying to encode ethical principles directly into the design of the algorithms. And as practitioners, data scientists, software engineers, we all have a key role to play in this.
Wonderful insights, Alex, and I like how you touched on diversity of groups and teams in developing AI systems, because I guess, in the different viewpoints that we bring in, that's how we judge fairness across the different groups. I think that's amazing, right? That representation. Nonna, I've got a question for you, right? We've spoken a lot about responsible AI, but coming from a data management space, And I know in RMIT, we've got something called a data ethics framework, right? How does responsible AI compare with a data ethics framework? Is it one and the same thing, or should we be thinking about these things differently?
My response could be a bit controversial because I am a data person, and to me, data is the basis of AI and everything that we build. So in my mind, you actually have to develop a data ethics framework that should cover all of these other things. The first thing is data. How do we use the data? How do we generate data? How we control data? How we curate it? How we process it? How we store it? All of these aspects. How do we manage data along the data life cycle will play a big role in any future developments as well. And fairness there and compliance with the data ethics principles at that basic level will basically define your success in the future. So you start with that. That's the starting point. Then you look at the ethics in AI, in machine learning, in any of the algorithms that we develop for our products or for our information systems. And you look for bias there, and you look how this algorithm can comply with the data ethics principles. And the last thing is what Alex Antic was just mentioning, is practices, governance, controls, people, all of that. So to me, it's a three-pronged approach. You always start with data lifecycle and how data ethics apply there, algorithm, including machine learning and AI, and also practices, frameworks, people, governance, all around that. Just one of the examples I can give you is we all, well, most of us are users of social media, and Facebook in particular. And Facebook announced that they're building an AI to identify people with suicidal thoughts so that they can alert first, how is it called? Like first line respondents. Yeah. And on the outset, this is a very noble aim, right? Let's help people. Let's give them help as early as possible so they don't commit suicide. But you know, if you look under the covers, there was no opt-out option for people. You know, not everyone wants to Facebook to be so invasive as to read all of your posts and identify whether you have suicidal thoughts. Some people may need to opt out. Another thing is transparency, which is one of the greatest principles of any data ethics. They would not give anyone to examine the algorithm that they use for that AI. So all of these questions, you know, they can't be really, it's not one or another, it's all of these things together that will give you a good framework for data ethics and responsible AI.
Fantastic examples, Nonna. We're going to move on quite quickly to the next topic, but before I do, I just want to open up to the panel. So, you know, Alex, you talked about practical things such as documentation that we need to be keeping so that we can start to explain why we've chosen certain data sets or use a certain technique, right? Are there any suggestions from the panel of practical things that we as practitioners can do to ensure that we're, I guess, operating ethically?
One of the areas shown we can be more vigilant is that including whether it's like new study data scientist or if you are experienced data scientist, there are always roles, collaborating, right? So as I think Nonna touched on as well, and Alex did as well, about it's multidisciplinary sports, like a team sports, right? So really awareing that you can't solve all the problem by yourself, but we are together, like bringing all the other people with a different background, different thoughts, different perspectives, and make sure that actually the really understanding the ethics and all this bias are not like a one-off exercise. Try to make sure that it's the model is actually deployed and then used in the production environment is monitored, so that we are vigilantly tracking and monitoring if anything has drifted, or any you can think about whether what was ethical and satisfied in our framework of responsible AI was back in last year is still true now. So all these things are really, you can't do it by yourself. You don't try to solve the problem by yourself, and always ensure that you are working truly collaborative environment, teamwork, and then try to make sure that you do your role properly, but also make sure that you can really thoroughly asking the right question to the right team, so that you can bring everyone to the table, so that we can have a truly multidisciplinary team, and then we can really ensure that there's no the caveats, or there's no area that we didn't consider, because sometimes we don't expect what we don't know, right? So it is kind of practice that really encouraging you be brave and talk to other people, and I think they will help to improve the problems gradually, and we'll get there. As I think I've heard from the panelists, great practice. The people, even Facebook, Nonna mentioned that we are trying to use AI for good, which is a great step. And then we can bring the best practice, what's happening other side of the world, into Australia and APAC region, so that we can kind of promote it and try to really work together.
Thanks, Angela. Nonna, you got a point.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm very pragmatic in my approach to this thing. So you can't really manage what you can't define. So once for every company that I work for, the first thing you need to do is to define what that data ethics means for you, and what are the key principles, because there are many that you can choose from that are really applicable to your organization. So at RMIT, we do have a set of principles that we decided are very important for us. And to implement these principles, there are a few things that are absolutely critical. One is, how does your organization understand and know which principles apply to you? So training, right? Training, making sure that that policy and framework is embedded in people's mind, that they understand that it's their accountability as much as everybody else's accountability as well. But then on top of that, you can provide some tools for people to do it. Peer reviews, review someone else's algorithm and be the reviewer for somebody else. Or can we create a checklist and go through the checklist to see if we met all of the obligations under the framework? So, it's a very complex issue that you can't tackle all together, but you can tackle it based on small individual steps that needs to be implemented.
Thanks, Nonna. Over to Ben.
I'm just loving this discussion so much, and find myself nodding in agreement with so many things. I think these points are super important about bringing diverse stakeholders into the discussion, and the complementary strengths that we can all bring. I think I think everyone's been making this point, but I just want to reiterate that it kind of holds at every level and at every stage of development. And so if you're working on a prototype for something and you're thinking, oh, we can worry about diversity later, no, just grab someone from the next desk or the next room, drag them in, and just take a couple minutes at a time, and they might point out a problem straight away that didn't occur to you. And if you do that, try to find someone who thinks differently to you, who maybe has a different kind of background to you, because they will have more useful opinions than someone who just kind of thinks the same as you do. I think, and then obviously later in the organization, the need to kind of bring in diverse groups from across the organization is super important. And I think the ways that kind of I think it was maybe Angela who mentioned how industry and academics can kind of work together, because I think they have like complementary strengths as well. And I think the ways some of my research has been on how machine learning research as like an academic research discipline focuses on a core set of problems, which are super important, but aren't always as necessary to kind of industry and kind of practical applications. And so how to actually bring that knowledge that often engineering teams have about practice and combine that with kind of this kind of more fundamental research that academics do. And then, of course, I think there's a need to kind of collaborate again with government, as Alex was saying. And I think there's a need to kind of make sure that we educate and bring policy makers like with us on this journey. Often when you meet politicians, they have no training in data or data science or any of these topics. And even understanding what these words mean, I've heard people get confused about the difference between a data set and a model and just use those words interchangeably, right? Which is such a fundamental distinction. But if you're a politician and you have to cover like 100 different topics a week, from sports to arts, and then you have like half an hour on this ML thing that comes up, so I think educating policymakers and engaging with government and regulators is a super important role, both for academics and for industry. Yeah, I think I just want to mention like there's some really good examples which I'd encourage people to kind of seek out. One is Joy Bulamwini has a set of fantastic videos online which shows kind of the consequences of not including diversity in your teams. So she's a Black woman from America, and she has great videos where she tests out kind of face detection software on computers, like the kind of thing that might unlock your computer when you're looking at the camera, and just showing how that systematically fails for her dark-skinned face, whereas it works for pale-skinned faces. And when you see these kind of examples, like you feel it in your gut that it's just not working for people. So I encourage people to kind of seek out those examples as well. There's great examples as well of people trying to use those automatic soap dispensers, and they put their hand underneath, and the system doesn't recognize, dark skin. I think if they had any Black people on their teams when they were developing this product, if they had one Black person on their team testing this product, this should have been caught a lot earlier. So diversity across race, gender, skin tone, all these dimensions. I'll leave it there.
Ben, wonderful examples. Can I ask you if you can share a couple of links in the chat or just point us to where we can find those examples? I think that would be fantastic. Alex, closing comments around ethics, and then let's move on.
Thank you. So I think if you just started an internship, or if you're graduating and entering a role, there's three simple things you can do immediately beyond what Nonna was saying about educating yourself around the principles and ethics that exist within your organization. And these three are stop, think, and question. So first of all, before you start grabbing code and building a model, which is really exciting, you want to develop your first, production level deep learning model. You're grabbing some data, using SQL, you're coding away, ingesting data. First stop and try and think about the data that you're collecting, or using for your analysis. So just pause, have a look. Where will you get the data? Can you get other data sets to use? If you're getting data from social media, what are some of the potentially ethical implications there? And then start thinking about, that deeper level, this data, what will it be used for? Where does it come from? How was it collected? How is it being stored? Is there security, enough security around it? Was it collected in a fair way? Was it collected for one purpose, but now I'm trying to use it for a different purpose? And then start questioning the whole process. Is this organization doing this in a potentially unethical way? Not in a, they may not be doing that explicitly, but maybe there's different ways you can improve that process. So questioning things in general. Why is it being done this way? Can it be done a different way? Asking questions, not being afraid to ask questions from your peers, from your management, in a way that helps everyone question things deeper and create discussion and discourse internally. I think it only help everyone. So just don't be scared to ask those important questions, and just think about things more broadly. Always pause and think about what you're doing, not just about ethics, but about the broader scale of the work you're doing. I think that can really change how your career develops, even in the early years.
Thanks, Alex. That's really great advice. Something that resonates with me as well, in terms of really thinking and having high standards. Because once we start dropping standards, they only can keep dropping. So I think it's about really having high standards of ethics at the start. All right, let's move on to the next topic, and I'll save some time for questions later. And I think it's been a great discussion on responsible AI and ethics, but I also wanted to put some thought starters here around our careers, right? So firstly, again, the same report from Stanford University around AI, looking at, I guess, universities offering undergrad courses that teach AI skills, and that's more than doubled in the last 3 years. It's so hot even here at RMIT that we've got courses at multiple levels, even non-accredited levels, all the way up to having 2 master's programs, all right, and a new research center being stood up for AI, right? So it's a really hot topic amongst universities. In terms of jobs, this was an OECD survey in 4 countries, and it shows, I guess, that there's been very strong growth in AI-related jobs since 2014, as you can see. And the last teaser, also from OECD, and the data scientists in the room will probably curse me for showing word clouds, but this is what they had, right? I guess this shows on the left AI-related skills in a web scrape of AI jobs posted on job portals, right? And on the right shows non-AI related skills in those same AI related jobs. So it's a very interesting view of AI skills and non-AI related skills, all within these realm or perspective of AI jobs, right? So I'm going to throw it to the panel for your reflections, right? And please don't tell me you hate word clouds, because I think word clouds are probably simplistic in that nature. But what jumps out at you in terms of what you're seeing, and perhaps reflecting on your own personal journeys of where you've come from, how has whatever has jumped out at you, how has that developed in your career over time? It's a very broad question, so happy for anyone to jump in.
I can start in terms of thanks for sharing this, Sean. I think I can see that there's great interest in data science and AI skill sets and the career, and how they're really it's hyped, because everyone wants to be a data scientist at one stage, and data engineers, right? Probably the result is coming from 2018. So if fast forward, and if you want to run it again, 2022 data, I'd like to see is mixture of as much as technical emphasis, but also a lot of people are talking about ethical and responsible AI component, because I can see that a lot of tech companies, like for example Google, not because Ben is here, but Google's established a great pair, the good framework, where how really you can really drill down into the problems and how to solve it and how to really understand and how we can go about it. Like how Nonna mentioned about we need some real practical step-by-step with the approach, which means it helps to data scientists and engineers, because by nature we data scientists and engineers are like broken down steps, and we are very pragmatic in terms of approaching problems, and then very solving step-by-step approach, right? So there are a lot of great practice coming through, and I'm hoping to see different changes in the future. And look around, a lot of tech companies are really sharing amazing framework, and it matters to you, because they are probably the tech organizations that you're going to work in the future, and your voice matters, because knowing that and following it and understanding, and if there's anything, any area that can be improved, share it around and try to improve it. And that's how we can develop better the framework as we go along. So that's kind of my 2 cents here.
Thanks. I've got some hands up on the panel as well. So if I look at who had their hand up first, I think it's Alex.
I think it was Ben, actually.
Oh, was it? I think Ben put it down and went to the back of the
I think mine was up before. I think yours was raised.
Okay, I'm happy to go then. So
yeah,
I've been a data scientist. I've been managing and leading data science and hiring data science teams for a while. So here's my take on the whole industry, where it is and where it's shifting. From a technical perspective, you can't escape understanding R and Python. Python is more dominant in most organizations, but in some organizations they only code in R, so you need to be able to code in both. So don't worry about understanding one language only, but trying to understand the deep paradigms behind coding itself. But if you're going to only choose 2, then choose R and Python. In some contexts, Julia is becoming more common. And also more broadly, where the industry is shifting is in distributed programming. So things like Apache Spark framework and Scala programming. If you're going down the software development path, I think it's worth learning them at least at some level. Understanding common algorithms that are used in ML, things around, looking at prediction, classification, supervised and unsupervised learning, working with structured and unstructured data. That's all imperative. Working, with text-based data, so current and predominant NLP algorithms, and also computer vision and everything associated with that. It's pretty important. But in some contexts, there's also growing need for variations of that. So for some organizations, graph analytics, for instance, will become much more common. And I think understanding graph analytics at some level will really put you in good stead for growth in your career, especially from a research perspective. Before you do all that, I strongly encourage students to really increase their understanding of the fundamentals behind all these algorithms. That is the mathematics and statistics that underpin it, and also coding in general, the basics principles of coding. If you're coming from data science and not so much software engineering, then things like good commenting style is absolutely paramount, source control, things like Git, peer review, having all that as a strong base will really make you stand out as a data scientist. If you're a software engineer, then understanding the basics around data science, because you'll be working with data science algorithms and with data scientists, I think is very important. And then, specific packages like TensorFlow, Keras as well, I think it's worth knowing. But it's really dictated by the domain you work in. In some organizations, they may lean on one heavily, others not so much, but they all want to know that you understand the basic principles and the fundamentals that drive all these technologies. So once you have a really strong fundamental understanding, it shows your aptitude to pick up variations and technicalities in other areas. What took me a long time to learn in my career, I'm a slow learner, obviously, is the importance of what are termed the soft skills, which are becoming core skills more commonly. Things like communication are absolutely fundamental and imperative to build your career, to really make you stand out compared to your peers and to really move you to the next level, especially when you're jumping different levels. Being able to document your code and write succinctly, but most importantly, knowing when to transition from technical jargon with your peers to business jargon when you're talking to your management and stakeholders is, I cannot stress how important that is. When you're speaking to someone senior about the results of your model, they do not care about the POC, ROC and other aspects of true positive, false negatives, all that. All they want to know is what's the direct impact on my organization? What are the dollars associated, or the FTE, or how are you going to reduce efficiency or increase efficiency, or whatever the case is. You need to be able to translate and speak in their terms when needed, and do it concisely, clearly, and non-ambiguously. So that is absolutely important. You also need to learn how to work as a team. You may have worked by yourself on a lot of assignments and other model and projects throughout your academic life, but once you're working in a real team, more often than not, you have to work as a team, and you have to work productively as a team. So you have to know when to speak up when you're not sure about something. You have to be comfortable asking for help when you need it and not letting it drag on too long. That took me a long time. I was very proud early on and did a lot of stuff myself very well. Sometimes on these large projects with very tight deadlines, you need to know when to reach out and say, hey, how can we work together? So that is really important. And just general points around problem solving, logical thinking. It's all really paramount in this industry. You need to question things, as I mentioned earlier, and really know when to speak up, share your thoughts, and sometimes, more often than not, when to shut up and listen to the people around you. So you want to try and early in your career be in a situation where they're doing interesting work, but where you're working with great people that are experienced, where you can just feed off them. You can listen, learn, ask questions, and then grow from there. It takes a while. Just like Dwayne Johnson, you can't walk into a gym and start pumping iron and walk out looking like him. You really need to invest time and energy in data science and software engineering, learning the fundamentals, then learning about the business that you work in, and then more broader than that, learning about the broader context of the industry. So try find a mentor early on, and hit yourself to them and try and learn and listen. And then when you've matured enough, try and give back to the industry. And it's a great community. Everyone's constantly learning and sharing information, and I think that should put most people in good stead for a great and exciting career.
Thanks, Alex. Wonderful wonderful words of wisdom. There's so much, to capture in what you've just said, looking at the technical side as well as the soft skills. Nonna, what are your reflections?
I so much agree with what's been said before, but I want to start with the end rather than the beginning. I really like the quote from Alice from Wonderland that says, if you don't know where you're going, any road will lead you there, right? You actually need to know where you're going. If I'm thinking about my career, I had a first degree in civil engineering, and I had a second degree in project management. And then I specialized in data quality and data management. And then I ended up being a chief data officer with wide responsibility for strategy, delivery, analytics, all of that kind of stuff. None of these skills that I've learned during my career actually got lost. Engineering taught me the importance of standards and importance of mathematics, and project management taught me how to put things together so that they actually got delivered. And data quality was fundamental for everything that I do now in my role as the chief data officer. So think broader. Don't be afraid to experiment. To me, that's really important. And I agree with Alex. Challenge, because if I'm thinking about what really moved my career forward was one episode where a company that I worked for engaged a very well-known and vendor to deliver the methodology of how to measure the value, not the value, but how to estimate the cost of poor data quality. And they developed a 250 pages report that was presented at every level of the organization, except that people were no wiser of how to do it after they read the report. Whoever had a chance to even read the 250 pages report. So I've challenged that, and I've created a 10-page, very clear workflow that all of a sudden people could relate to. Yeah, this is what I have to do. And that really moved my career forward. So just because you're working on something and you see that it works a certain way, nothing is set in stone. Challenge that. Be innovative, be curious. And ethics is a big part of that as well. If you are courageous, if you are curious, it will move your career forward. But know where you want to go.
Thanks, Nonna. Amazing. Ben, over to you next.
Thanks, John. I'm really enjoying all these reflections on everyone's careers, by the way. Like, I always assumed my career had been so unusual and I should have learned things a lot earlier. So it's nice seeing some of these other people having similar stories. I think you're just in huge agreement with all the comments being made about kind of the importance of especially in responsible AI, of being able to communicate with a diverse range of stakeholders. I think Alex called it soft skills. Maybe I often call it core skills. I think it's really the foundational skills that underpin so much of what we do. And I think, if I think about my technical time writing code, learning how to write good code comments is a really, it takes a lot of practice to learn how to write good code comments. And one of the top tips that kind of I learned over the years is don't document what the code does, because a skilled engineer can kind of read that and work it out later. But the best comments describe why the code is the way it is. And I think this applies not just to individual lines of code, but entire systems that they're building. I think this kind of builds on points that both Nonna and Alex and everyone was making about the importance of transparency and documenting, like really documenting these why decisions. and commuting that, because often you can't ascertain after the fact why something happened, right? But you can often ascertain afterwards, like what the data is. You can look at the data, but you can't ascertain why it was collected the way it was collected.
Yep.
And related to this point of why, I think getting into the practice of asking why, of kind of thinking critically, just asking that question constantly over and over, like practicing, it's a skill you can kind of practice engaging, is that critical thinking of constantly. I think I annoy some of my colleagues to hell by constantly asking them, why are you using this metric? Why are you using that? Why are you using that data set? And they're like, well, everyone uses that data set. Everyone uses that metric. And that's not a good answer. Like, if you're developing a product, I want a better answer than that's what somebody else used, right? So I think if you practice asking these questions, why, and I think, you know, engaging in projects which you care passionately about, you do care about the data. Like if it's a domain you care about, you will naturally kind of build this skill up, and then apply it to other projects you're involved in as well. So really, these kind of critical thinking skills, I think, are such an important part for responsible AI.
Thanks, everyone. Now we're already 3 minutes over time. I just want to open it up to the to the people on the call to see if there are any questions, and we hope we can finish by about 12:10. So, any questions at all? All right. To start things off, in case people are still thinking, there was a question here around development of AI models. Do we need to be aware of factors which we don't have data for? And so do we assume just ideal conditions of the study when we're building models? For example, do we build models for the most privileged cohort or the most common cohort in terms of income, you know, housing, family, etc.?
I think, Sean, I think that's a really great question, right? So I think that really relates to the comment. I think previously Nonna also mentioned, and Ben also, Alex mentioned about, you know, really considering what might impact. So even though the data part we don't have, and it doesn't exist in your current, the data, internal data, but as you mentioned, maybe at the end of the year or next year, we might be able to access third-party data, right? And it might impact the model. So it is really a thoughtful, you know, consideration about, maybe in the future. So considering and make a, when you're building the model, make a comment like, you know how Ben mentioned about to make a comment about why. So the why part comes in, because by clearing, by the way, we are doing this now because of this, but in the future, if there's availability, then it might need to reconsider. You might have to, fine-tune the features again, because it might have that, unexpected consequences, right? That kind of, comment, thoughtful mindset really make a big difference. So I think, again, have an empathy. I think for data scientists, it's very funny why empathy, but it really helps to understand how you approach it with a different angle, and make sure that you help your peers around. Because, trust me, because without all my experience, I'm here and I'm doing and I'm continue doing what I'm doing, not because I am good at it. It's the people around me who helped me. And that's why when you reach a certain level of a career, you try to make sure that you help other people as well. And that's how we continue grow together in, AI and data scientists, the community.
It raises a fantastic broader question, Sean, and that is the reality of working in data science and the AI field. And it comes down to one simple fact, is often you're not working on really sexy, awesome, leading edge deep learning models. Often you're working on much simpler models, but most of your effort is and should be placed on sourcing the right data that is required to solve a business problem, which is ultimately what determines what you're trying to do and what model you choose. But also ensuring validity and the fact that data set is representative of the cohort or the population you're trying to encompass. So I think it's important to really think a lot about the data itself. If you're looking at supervised learning techniques, having enough effort placed on labeled data, making sure that you have enough labeled data. And if you don't, looking at methods to actually try and label that data. If that involves human intervention, then making sure there's consistency and standardization around that. That can have a huge impact on the accuracy of your model and applicability of the model down the end of the line, rather than spending a lot of time choosing the model and fiddling around with various parameters and, hyperparameters and all that stuff. That's all fun and good, but really effort needs to be placed, that we touched on having the right data set to be used to solve that particular problem. The modeling part is relatively easy then. It's sourcing the data and having the right data set at your disposal when you need it. That is really the challenge. And I'll let Ben follow on from that.
Oh, I just wanted to agree and mention some work done by some of my colleagues that I thought was really interesting. I'm not sure it applies to all areas of machine learning, but in the kind of the fields they looked at, they definitely found that, and they were critical of this, and I agree with their criticism, that often this work of really careful, thoughtful data collection and really careful, thoughtful data labeling practices are so critical to the enterprise. But often people with skills in the latest deep learning models and architectures are more valued or more celebrated in the field. And I think this is a real problem. I think these careful data skills are so important, and they need to be valued more. And that's something I think we all need to do, is make sure that data work is appreciated. That's both, I think, for the data scientists who are leading this, but also for the individuals who are doing the data labeling work. If you have crowd workers labeling your data, make sure you also understand where they're coming from and that they're getting paid fairly, for example. Because if I kind of think if you're not paying people fairly for data work, then you're going to get what you pay for, as well as the kind of the moral implications of not paying people as well. So I think really appreciating the value of good data is so important.
All right. Thanks. Any more questions? We've got 1 more minute. So if there are any questions from the floor. If not, I can only say that we've done so well in covering those topics that you've answered all the questions. I think we've done an amazing job in the content we've covered. It feels like we've covered 2 hours worth of stuff in 70 minutes, right? So I just want to thank Angela, Ben, Nonna, and Alex for sharing your insights, your wisdom. I have been inspired and energized really from this discussion. We'll be sharing the link to the event, possibly on the CRE Bootcamp Skills website as well. But can I get everyone who's still on the call just to show your appreciation, a virtual hand clap, thumbs up, or something? I think it's really, really great to have had our guests today on the panel. And to everyone who attended, thank you for attending as well. I guess it was all possible because of you. So thanks for attending, and I hope it's been a great session for everyone. Oh, Doreen, you had your hand up.
Oh, sorry. I did have a last minute question, and it's just a very general one. But how important is passion and curiosity in terms of being successful in this role?
The short answer is extremely important. Extremely. Curiosity is one of the key skills that any professional might have, but in data and analytics, to me, it's number one.
Exactly. Can't agree with you, Nonna. Extremely important. No matter, because if you can do arithmetic and you can do normal study, then everyone's intelligent, highly intelligent, right? But your passion and curiosity really comes first, because they really motivate you to learn more. Because I'm really curious and I'm really inspired, and I enjoy what I do, because so that you want to learn more, you want to understand more every day. Still, I wake up and at nighttime, I'm thinking, oh, how can I do it? I better check it tomorrow morning. It keeps me going and do the right thing as a data scientist, because you really love what you do. So passion, curiosity, definitely.
Yeah.
I definitely agree that curiosity is just so important. And the people who love data, you can tell they get a data set and they want to poke around and play and explore with it, and they're having fun with that data. And that's when you get these interesting insights, when they're asking the questions that no one else is even asking of the data. In my own personal career, definitely I wouldn't have got where I am without being passionate about it. And to kind of maybe build on what Angela said, not really contradicting, I think, but there are parts of every job you're not going to enjoy, right? There are parts that are going to be painful or not enjoyable, but it's the passion for the project that drives you through those unenjoyable bits and lets you really kind of enjoy and flourish in the bits you do enjoy.
And here's a tip. make sure it comes through in your application process. In the interview
Oh,
stage,
absolutely.
speaking to
We're
people.
recruiting at the moment, and I'm going through resumes, and I'm really trying to see that passion and curiosity
Yes.
for the role, and it's not coming through in some of the resumes that I'm.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that was
Sometimes,
on my mind at the moment.
Ah, definitely. Sometimes you'll also see, or you can show that passion by setting up a, say, Git repo publicly available. You can show potential employers what passion projects you're working on and document what Ben was saying, why you're doing it. You know, why is this of interest to you? What problem are you trying to solve? And what learning process are you going through? You can make mistakes and show people it doesn't matter. It's about that you're going through this transition and you're learning from those mistakes and learning new skills. And that translates to then how you will act as an employee for that organization. And that's what they're looking for.
Yeah.
They want people that are
You
committed.
can-
Sorry.
I just want to say you can teach people some of the ways of working and technical skills, but it's that cultural fit. It's that ability to understand why you're doing what you're doing and be passionate about it, and be curious and trying to improve things as you go. That's what you're looking for in the applicant.
All right, we have truly run out of time, but I want to thank everyone. And what you're seeing on the screen is what's coming up in the next few weeks for the seminar series. So keep a lookout for that, and hope to see you again. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you very much.
Sean. Thank you, Sean. Thank you,
Thanks, Sean.
everyone.
Thank you to the panel. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers. Bye.